What is up, everybody? Welcome back in with another WNBA update. On today's edition of the podcast, we're getting into Caitlin Clark. What does the remainder of her season look like? And on that subject, WNBA injuries. Some of the biggest stars in the sport have been sidelined for some time or another at some point this season. So what does that mean for the league big picture? We'll get into that. Plus, we'll preview the four, yes, you heard it, 4 Lynx Liberty matchups over the next couple of weeks and how that can unfold in the standings. So let's dive right in and let's start how we always do every single show before we tip off our first quarter, the Fast 5 stories that you may have missed this past week in the WNBA. Let's start with number 1. Jonquel Jones returns to the court in Liberty's Tuesday night victory over the Indiana Fever. The Liberty outlasted them with a 98-84 victory, and Jonquel Jones had 18 points and 9 rebounds in her 23-minute return. So Jonquel Jones wasting no time in her WNBA return and a pivotal piece for the Liberty as they make a championship push. Number 2, Breanna Stewart, on the other hand, she exited the Liberty versus Sparks game within the first couple of minutes of the game with a right leg injury. Now, the MRI came back and it is not serious. It is, at least right now, from what we know, not going to keep her off the court for the entirety of the season. Liberty, though, they'll give her plenty of time to recover. But the Liberty get Jonquel Jones back. But now, will they lose Breanna Stewart for a few games? How long will they lose Breanna Stewart? At least the good news is what looked to be a really scary injury may not end up being as severe as we initially thought. Head coach Sandy Brondello said, no update yet, but hopefully she'll be okay. And I know all Liberty fans are thinking that same thing. Let's move on to number 3. The Minnesota Lynx were on a 14-0 home game win streak, and the team that ruined that streak for them, the Atlanta Dream. So should we keep an eye on the Atlanta Dream to go up in the standings and make a push as we enter the second half of this season? Number 4, Indiana Fever's Sophie Cunningham said that she was fined $500 for criticizing WNBA referees on TikTok. She was lip-syncing Sabrina Carpenter lyrics, implying the refs were stupid, slow, and useless. That TikTok had more than 1.3 million views and even more across other platforms. So let them know, Sophie. Let them know. Number 5, DeWanna Bonner makes her return back to Phoenix. She says she is thankful for her journey. She regrets nothing. She started her WNBA journey with the Phoenix Mercury in 2009, and she was with them for 10 years before she went to the Connecticut Sun for 5 years, and she had a brief stint with the Indiana Fever, and now the 2-time WNBA champ, 3-time 6th Man of the Year, has gone full circle and receives a warm welcome from Phoenix fans. Any welcome in Phoenix in July is going to be a warm one. Okay, that was this week's Fast 5. Everything that you may have missed this past week in the WNBA. So let's get into it. It is game time. Time for our 4 quarters. She's Cassandra Negley. I am Caroline Fenton. Cass, lots of things were happening in the W this past week in our post-All-Star world. So let's kick it off with our first quarter. Caitlin Clark. She hasn't played since July 15th. She's missed a total of 12 games this season. That's almost half of the entirety of this season. Have we seen the last of Caitlin Clark in the 2025 season?
I think it's definitely possible. The Fever released a statement on July 24th, just kind of updating or non-updating her status. They said she underwent further medical evaluations. The team can confirm that there's no additional injuries or damage that were discovered through the evaluations. But then it says Clark will continue working with the Fever medical team on her recovery and rehabilitation with the priority on her long-term health and well-being, which kind of maybe sets the stage a little bit in terms of what I read between the lines, that there is a possibility they shut her down for the season, maybe avoid some of these continuous injuries she's undergoing and look towards the future, because the reality is they do have Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin on rookie contracts. Depending on how the CBA goes and those other contracts, you could bring a lot of this team back. We really don't know what next year holds. And if you're building around Caitlin, you want to have a healthy Caitlin. So I do think it's a possibility.
And Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark are the future of the Fever. And it's Caitlin Clark. She's the future of the Fever. She is the future of the WNBA as now the face of the WNBA. So I do understand from the Fever's perspective protecting their long-term investment. Do we shut Caitlin Clark down in the second half of this season in order to maintain her for next season and beyond for the rest of her career? Like, I can understand how that's a really difficult decision to make, but that's a very wise one in the long term. And I saw Caitlin Clark said to the media, this is the first time in my life where I feel like I can't just run around and not just bounce back, that it's the first time that it feels like it's really kind of weighing on her, that I don't doubt that it's probably physically it's been a lot, and frankly kind of emotionally as well. There's a lot of weight on Caitlin Clark's shoulders. I mean, I just said it. She's the face of the league. Anytime she does anything, it feels like it's front page news, the topic of conversation on any show on your respective, network. That's a lot on a person. And she talked a lot in this past offseason about making that transition from college draft W, all within the span of just a few weeks. And that this past offseason was the first time in 2 years that she really got a chance to breathe and step back and appreciate what she's done and appreciate her impact and just enjoy things outside of basketball that physically, mentally, emotionally, all of the above, that can catch up to anybody.
Yeah, she said she finally didn't feel like a young body, which is hilarious for a 24-year-old.
Yeah.
If I'm the Fever, though, you're totally right. Like, you're thinking long term. Yes, you wanted to win a championship this year. I think you still can. We don't know the extent of this injury. They've been kind of mum about the grade of the injuries and what exactly is going on. So it seems like maybe there's a possibility you shelf her for a little bit, you ramp her up in the right ways, you try and get her some sort of practice, which is very, very hard in this league. And we're going to get into that more when we talk about all of these injuries. But if you can shelf her for a little bit, if she is healthy, the Fever will be a playoff team, I think, even without her. So if you can incorporate her back within, kind of 2 weeks before the playoffs, I think you could still make a lot of noise because your ceiling is incredibly high.
Yeah, I'm a believer, like in sports and life in general, you don't do anything unless you have to. Right now, the Indiana Fever don't have to do anything right now. They don't have to make a decision about Caitlin Clark's, her timeline throughout the rest of the season. They don't have to make that decision right now. So if you're the Fever, if you don't have to say today, Monday, July 28th, when we're recording this podcast, what they want to do with Caitlin Clark in August, well, then they're not going to. They can now afford to sit back and have those really candid conversations with her and say, you tell us. You tell us what you think is best for you and what we think, what our doctors, what our trainers think is the next best path for you. But you brought it up that the Fever can still make a playoff push. Now, whether you think without Caitlin Clark they're a championship contender or not, I would probably lean toward no, but hey.
I would agree.
But I'm looking at Kelsey Mitchell and what she did just the other night. Kelsey Mitchell putting up 35 points, 6 assists, 3 steals against the Sky on Sunday night. Now, I understand it's the Chicago Sky. And the Chicago Sky are not necessarily considered world beaters in the world of the WNBA, but it is still, still massive. I mean, she joins Caitlin Clark as the only other player in Indiana Fever franchise history to record 35 plus, 5 plus assists, and 5 plus 3 points made in a single game. So it's substantial. If Kelsey Mitchell plays like that, if the Fever played like they did in the Commissioner's Cup championship game against the Minnesota Lynx, like they have that championship DNA. But is that enough with the ups and the downs and the highs and the lows and the hots and the cold that we've seen from the Indiana Fever?
Yeah, it's so easy to forget that Kelsey Mitchell was a lottery pick. I mean, she was a star draft pick for the Fever in her own right, really carried the Fever for a lot of years. The difference between her then and her the last few years when she has been an all-star is all of the talent around her to kind of take some of that defensive gravity and allow her to work. I agree. I don't think they're a championship team without Caitlin, but certainly they have a very good defense. And if they can get it consistently together, I mean, I just don't see them falling out of kind of that 8th place range. I think the concern though is if Caitlin is healthy, I mean, you're obviously, like, if Caitlin is fully healthy, she's ready to go. The doctors say she is ready to go. We are not gravely concerned about this. How does she incorporate back into the team on a short runway to the playoffs? But you could also, like, take the flip of that and say, well, we're building for what we hope to have next year, because that was the big thing last year. They don't have any playoff experience. It was like criminal how little playoff games they had together. So you can at least build that way.
Right. And again, they don't have to make that decision today. They can evaluate over the next couple of days and weeks. And if Caitlin Clark feels like she's, doesn't have to be 100%, if she's 85% and feels like that's all she needs to be to go out there and make this push and, help the Fever ascend in the standings, which I don't think is going to be an incredibly easy thing to do, but there is kind of that really tight upper middle class of the WNBA in the standings right now. If they get to that point, then that's the choice that you make. That's the path that you decide to go down. But I think there's just still too many question marks of exactly what is going on behind the scenes and what exactly that timeline might look like. But all this conversation about Caitlin Clark's injury and how that's kept her off the court, and look, that will hurt the league. That will hurt the league in terms of viewership. That will hurt the league in terms of tickets being sold. I even heard a conversation on a sports talk radio show talking about, hey, Caitlin Clark and the Fever, they're coming to my city and I really want to bring my kids, but if Caitlin Clark's not playing, I don't want to go. And that might anger some WNBA fans, but that's just the reality of where the W is right now. That if Caitlin Clark played in the All-Star game, maybe there would be a higher viewership. Granted, that was the second most watched All-Star game in the history of the league, but still a significant decline from last year.
I'll throw in there as well, though, whenever you look at another league, this is the same story, right? Like, players are negotiating their CBA, and one of the things they're saying, like Kelsey Plum said, specifically using this name, she said people are coming out to watch Paige Bueckers, for example. And so stars sell tickets, as you said. This is not just true of the WNBA. This is true of the NBA when LeBron doesn't play, and the NFL when you're a whatever fan. If you're a Chiefs fan and Patrick Mahomes isn't playing, maybe you consider selling your tickets, whatever. This is standard.
Yeah, this is a sports thing. And it's understandable, right? Because when I go to an NFL game, I don't want to see backups. I don't want to see third string quarterbacks. I want to see Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow. Like, it's a natural thing in life and in sports. And that's just kind of what the WNBA is facing right now. And it's kind of the reality, which brings us to the second quarter on today's program. And that's the injuries that have riddled the WNBA this year. Caitlin Clark has missed significant time. Angel Reese has been on the bench. Paige Bueckers missed some time this past weekend. Those are three of your biggest, if not the three biggest stars in this league and the future of this league. You throw in Brianna Stewart, who had an injury scare this past weekend. Satu Sabley has been dealing with an injury. Kayla Thornton is now out for the rest of the season with the Golden State Valkyries. We've had Jonquel Jones obviously be out for a considerable amount of time. Ryan Howard dealing with injuries as well. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on of big time players, marquee players in this league that have lost a significant amount of time due to injury. What is that? Is that something? Is that bad luck? Like, look, injuries just sometimes happen. This is sports. Is it the injury bug just biting at the worst time? Or is this something that can be avoided by the league?
I think it can be, I don't want to say avoided, because yes, like, injuries are sometimes just bad luck. I asked Sandy Brondello about this a couple weeks ago, actually the night that the Fever were in town and Caitlin didn't play. And she said, listen, some of it is just bad luck. You feel for a player, like, it's unfortunate. But she also said what a lot of players have said and other people have said, that having a longer season and maybe having less games that aren't on top of each other, she said, quote, I think that's the only solution, because these players are conditioned, but sometimes that's part of the game. Hopefully, maybe in the future, we'll have a longer season and less games in a week. We've talked about the schedule. It is tough. The Liberty just had a back-to-back. I think it was their second of the season. And so Sandy had talked a little bit about rest for Stewie. On Sunday, Paige had the designation for rest. And as you said, like, these are the future of the league. And it is telling that on a Sunday in July, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese were lined up against each other for Sky Fever, one of 5 matchups that the WNBA put into place this year. Neither one of them played, and then Paige did not play for Dallas.
Yeah, and it's, look, if a player, knock on wood, rolls an ankle walking into the locker room, like, that's not Kathy Engelbert's fault, right? Like, no. Injuries happen. It's a natural part of the game. It's a natural part of sports. I've heard a few theories thrown out there. One of those is officiating, that maybe referees need to be a little bit more quick with the whistle. And look, we've seen several scenes in the WNBA get incredibly physical because the refs didn't intervene sooner. I think that could be part of it. And I think the scheduling part, I think that really is the meat and potatoes of all of this. I saw this tweet put out by Rebecca Lobo, who of course calls women's basketball games for ESPN. She said a priority of the WNBPA is the new CBA has to be addressing the condensed schedule. So in 2021, there was on average 4 days in between games. That was just 4 years ago. In 2025, 2.7 days in between games. That's a significant difference when you're talking about a lot more travel, cross-country travel, especially when new teams and new markets are added into the W over the next 5 years. That's even more travel. So when you are putting your body at that kind of level of work, injuries are kind of inevitable. And I think that's absolutely going to be addressed in this upcoming CBA is days of rest. We talked about it with the All-Star game of, like, it's kind of ridiculous that you're playing a game on Wednesday and the All-Star break is Thursday to Sunday. So All-Star break and just overall scheduling in general.
Yeah, the officiating is a good call out because it's so many different things, right? I know in the past that players have talked about a lack of kind of like standout training and facilities and athletic trainers. Now that's changed for a lot of teams. They're hiring the very best to work with their players, but that has been a part of the lead up to officiating. Whenever you take a whole bunch of knocks or are being thrown around or taking hits night in and night out, like, it's exhausting. And as for travel as well, they do have charter now, which is nice. They can get home, they can sleep, they can rest. That was a part of it. But it seems like they've instituted charter while still condensing the schedule down as much as they can, saying, well, you have charters now. And the impact of flying is still there. I think for anyone who has been on the road a lot, in and out of airports, like, yes, they don't have to go through TSA. They can walk right onto the plane, but just flying can be exhausting.
Yeah, it's almost like you're taking a step forward and a step back. It's like, yes, you did something that was good and you did something that the players have been campaigning for so long, but then you just you took it the wrong direction. Now you're taking it backwards a little bit. And I think another important thing to remember as well is roster sizes in the WNBA are smaller. So the NBA, for example, like, you have load management happening because NBA sizes are larger. I saw this on Twitter as well, that an average of 19 different players will play for a respective NBA team versus 13 for the WNBA. So roster sizes are so much smaller. Star players and marquee matchups are playing every single night. You don't have that load management in the W that you might have in the NBA. So I think it's absolutely something that the WNBA, it's not just something that I think conditions that they should be making for the players. It's not just a little bit of a give and take. I think that's the WNBA protecting its investments and protecting its star players, because the league is better when Caitlin Clark, Paige Beckers, Angel Reese, so on and so forth are on the court, and we didn't get that this past weekend.
Yeah, these are the players that they want to market and they want to sell and they want people to come out and watch. Like, they are marketing it as that. It doesn't sound like, at least from what Kathy Engelbert said at All-Star, that they are expanding the schedule footprint all too much. And with only 44 games, if you break that down into, say, 22 home games, like, there's only so many opportunities for fans to go see the players they want to play. And if they're not playing, as we mentioned with Caitlin, like, there's questions if they will. So if you want to keep the momentum as a league and as a players union, you do have to look at these issues in the next CBA and see how you can start to solve them for the better of the league.
especially in a time of seismic growth for this league. Maintaining what you've built and building upon what you've built is paramount to continue the success that the W has seen over the past couple of years. All right, before we hit our third quarter, quick little halftime break, a little bit of a breather. Caitlin Clark's rookie card sells for $660,000, the most ever for a female athlete, and that's almost double the previous record. Cass, do you want to guess whose card that was?
Is it Caitlin Clark?
Ding, ding, ding. You are correct. It was Caitlin Clark, a 2024 Panini Prism WNBA Signatures Gold Vinyl Prism card. Now, I am not a card collector, nor am I familiar with that world. So any card collectors out there, please, I apologize when I say I have no idea what any of those words mean, but it does sound very fancy. But that card sold for $366,000 in 2024. And, on last week's episode, which of course you can find on the Yahoo Sports YouTube page, we talked about the investment into this league and the pay us what you owe us t-shirts were the players' way of championing for that. If we've grown the league is worth so much more now. We want a piece of that. This is just a microcosm of how much this league is worth, of investment into this league, that just last year a Caitlin Clark card went for $366,000. This year, $660,000 for a Caitlin Clark rookie card. I want to know, when I have that money, what kind of card am I? When, not if. Manifesting. What kind of stuff am I just gonna spend money on? Who wakes up and says, I'm gonna spend $500,000 on a card today?
Two types of people with way too much money or people with bad spending habits.
And maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah,
maybe
there's some crossover.
There's a cross section of that too. All right, third quarter. As we move along in today's program, DeWanna Bonner is back in Phoenix. So looking at the standings right now, you have the Minnesota Lynx that have a very comfortable lead in the league. They're sitting at 22-5, the New York Liberty at 17-7. And then you get into this very close difference by centimeters, by a hair, kind of 3-6, 3-7 in the W. You have the Phoenix Mercury, the Atlanta Dream, the Seattle Storm, and then you can throw the Indiana Fever and Las Vegas Aces in there as well. What do you think DeWanna Bonner adds to this Mercury team to keep them kind of above water, above that kind of mucky middle of the league?
She adds depth, she adds floor spacing, she adds an ability to fill spots that the Mercury have been so good at doing. Because they have this big three of Kalia Copper, who was there last year. They bring in Alyssa Thomas, and then they bring in Satu Sabali. I don't have the actual number in front of me, but they have rarely played together due to injury. So DB can step into that role. I also think one of the interesting things is how we talk about her tenure there is not done, but how we talk about kind of storybook endings or it's so full circle or whatever, because we were just talking about this with her in Indiana. And now suddenly we're talking about this with her in Phoenix, which is obviously where she had the most success in her career. She had that picture with Diana Taurasi, Penny Taylor, and Brittany Griner the other day. So she adds depth where they need it.
Yeah, and I also don't want there to be a certain narrative about her very quick little cup of coffee that she had in Indiana, because she came out and said it. She was like, look, it's part of my journey. My journey is my journey, and I'm going to accept that. She kind of squashed any rumors about her not liking coming off the bench or not liking her role in Indiana. She said it just wasn't a fit. It just wasn't. It was part of my journey, but now I'm going back to where I'm comfortable, where obviously I've had a whole lot of success. So I don't want there to be this conspiracy theory that DeWanna Bonner absolutely despised her time in Indiana or holds any sort of grudges in Indiana. I mean, obviously she wanted out, and that was clear. She made that very, very clear and very obvious. But I think it's, from her perspective, more about, all right, how do I finish out this season versus holding any sort of ill will toward Indiana. Am I off base with that?
I think if you're a Fever fan, we'll see how you feel about that when Phoenix comes to town in a couple days. I think I think it's tough. Like right now it's just kind of one person is saying something and another person is saying something. You can feel a lot of different ways about it. I mean, I don't know exactly what her tenure in Indiana was like or what it was perceived like from other places. I do know if I'm thinking of it in terms of a fan, I'm probably pretty upset that you're my big ticket free agency get that suddenly decided a few games in it wasn't a fit and you just left. I think as a fan, I would be mad at that no matter, the legacy of the player or the reasons the player made it or what have you.
Oh, I totally think as a fan, you have every right to be frustrated. That as a fan, you were stepping back and you're looking at what Indiana did this past offseason and saying, like, you were supposed to be one of these pieces of a championship puzzle. So we just talked about how little championship experience the Fever had this past season. Well, DeWanna Bonner has a ton of championship experience, period in the league. So if you're a fan, you're frustrated that she couldn't see through that vision that the front office had and what her role would be. So from a fan perspective, I totally understand. Look, fans can feel however they want to feel. But I mean, like, it's no secret that Phoenix has not had, hasn't reached the mountaintop. It's been over a decade since their last championship.
Since DB was there.
Exactly. Is it going to be we brought up bookends. Do you see Phoenix now with the addition of DeWanna Bonner? How much does her addition change your perspective of Phoenix as a championship contender?
I really don't think it changes it all that much. I see them as a championship contender, but at the end of the day, I lean towards teams who have been there, done it before, or made deep runs, and Phoenix didn't last year. This is a pretty new team altogether collectively, and I just think historically we don't usually see those teams break through for a title. I think teams with experience do that, and knowing how to come together in those really tight, stressful moments. We should also add on this topic that we've had all day, when you can stay healthy and when you're playing these really, really tight back-to-backs that the playoffs are probably going to be, given the extension of the finals inside of this still 1 month bubble here.
And I don't think it's fair to say that DeWanna Bonner, especially where she is at this point in her career, she's the difference between a championship run and not. Does she have depth? Absolutely. Familiarity with the program? Absolutely. With the franchise. But, at this point, I think I'm with you. That doesn't change things drastically, at least from my perspective of Phoenix and their postseason hopes, or at least championship hopes. But let's move along to our fourth quarter, a final rematch preview. So we had the WNBA finals last year, Minnesota Lynx and New York Liberty. We will see them for the first time, which is crazy that it is late July and we have not seen these two face off, but we will see them for the first time on Wednesday, July 30th. But if you miss it, don't worry, because you have 3 more opportunities to watch this matchup over the next couple of weeks. The 2 best offenses in the WNBA, 2 of the best defenses in the WNBA, 2 of the best teams in terms of assists, in terms of steals, so on and so forth. Just a quick thought preview on this game, this upcoming matchup, and really these 4 games that we're going to see between these two over the next couple of weeks.
This first game, I think, will be maybe a little clunky or even a blowout on either side. Obviously, we don't know exactly if Brianna Stewart will be healthy and ready to go. JJ's still ramping back up. New York is waiting on Emma Mieseman joining them once her visa clears. So that's going to change kind of their trajectory. It could go either way. What I'm most interested in, though, is those next 3 games are played within, I think, 10 days. So that's almost like a mini series, and I think that is going to feel a lot like the finals.
So let's just take a look at the schedule here. So this week on Wednesday, Minnesota hosts New York. So that's July 30th. And then between August 10th and August 19th, the Lynx go to New York, back home against New York, and then on the road at New York, 3 consecutive games on the Lynx schedule. So yeah, that's the finals. That's a mini little playoff run right there, smack dab in the middle of the season. Another theme of the day, scheduling. Maybe things like that in the future can be avoided. Maybe, just maybe, I don't know. We could have seen these 2 teams play earlier in the season. Maybe we didn't have to wait until July 30th to see these 2 play. Maybe it doesn't make very much sense to go New York, Minnesota, New York in the span of a week. I don't know.
It's a lot.
I just talk around here. I don't ask me to make any of the decisions, and that's probably a good thing. But let's look ahead to next week. Obviously, like I mentioned, we've got New York and Minnesota, the best 2 teams, the 2 teams at the top of the standings in the WNBA, facing off on Wednesday at 8 o'clock Eastern time. But just an hour before that, we will have the Phoenix Mercury on the road at the Fever. DeWanna Bonner will make her first return back to Indiana after being there for just a very short stint at the beginning of this season. But on August 1st, on Thursday, Phoenix heads to Atlanta. 2 of those teams kind of jockeying back and forth between that 3-5 and 3-6 spot in the standings. And they've also got Indiana heading to the Storm, 3 p.m. Eastern time on August 3rd. Anything stand out to you about those games, Cass?
Well, New York, Minnesota will be fun. Seeing DB's return to Indiana and how they handle that will be interesting. But I have the most eyes, I think, on Phoenix and the Dream. Those are 2 teams that have really pushed themselves into kind of top 4 contention. We could very well see them in the semifinals, so I want to see how the back end of the season plays out with them. And the Dream just took out the Lynx and ended their streak, so they have a lot of size that can be difficult to guard against.
And second half of the season, this is when it matters most. Pretenders and contenders separate themselves in August in the W. But next week, on next week's show, because of course we were back every single week with everything that you may have missed in the WNBA, the trade deadline is on August 7th. So next week we'll get into who should buy, who should sell, who could potentially be moving between now and August 7th. So all things trade deadline coming up on next week's edition with another WNBA update.